Hello, everyone. I am super excited to be here with you guys. I see there are so many people calling in from all over the place. We've got folks in Austin, Texas, and looks like Berlin, Germany, Berlino. We've got Crystal River, Florida, and Oakland, California. We got people from Massachusetts and Ohio. Whoa, Lily's in our Antarctica. I'm so excited. So I'm Reba. I go by Reba the Diva. I'm a pleasure positive sex educator to the stars, and I'm based in Washington D.C. And I'm super excited to be here with you guys because I will be your sensual self care guide this evening. And today we're going to talk a lot about sensuality and sexuality and pleasure. But just a little about me. I started a company called Sexpert Consultants, and we teach pleasure positive sex education workshops in DC and beyond, virtually and in person. And yes, we're known for like our fellatio workshops and our cunnilingus workshops. But today we're going to do our sensual self care workshop. So I'm super excited to have you guys here. If you never like thought about sensual self care, it is quite literally the intersection of your self care routine, right? Whatever that is, and sensuality and how you nourish that part of yourself through your self-care, right? I think, we do a lot of like exercise and, yoga and eating right as a part of our self-care routines. And that's great for our mental and physical health. But when it comes to our sexual health and just tapping into that sexual, sensual part of ourselves, there are some things that we can be doing to kind of just stay in tune with that part of ourselves. My favorite sex educator, sex therapist, her name is Esther Perel, and she's a lovely French woman who basically says that the greater the more selfish of a relationship that you have with pleasure, the better your sex is going to be, right? So I like to tell my clients to have a selfish relationship with pleasure. What does it look like for you to access pleasure for yourself? Because once you know that, you're able to have that conversation with partners a lot easier, right? And just having that self-awareness is great for your own exploration in general. So today we're going to cover a few things. I want this to be an interactive conversation, so please feel free to talk to me in the chat. I am very much listening. I will be here until about for the next hour or so, and then I'm going to hop over into the app, into the chat. So if you have any questions that I don't get to answer before uh, before the live ends, find me over on the app in the field chat, and I'm happy to keep the conversation going. And we just put the chat link in the app or in the chat here. So super excited. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go over is just how pleasure works, right? From all the different anatomy, how do orgasms work? What kind of orgasms are there? And what does that even mean, right? Then we're going to talk about kind of what drives your desire, right? What your sexual brakes and accelerators are, if you will. And then I'm going to leave you all with some sense-based techniques for kind of encouraging and incorporating that sensuality and nourishment of your sensual self into your self-care routine. So, yes. So we already have some questions in the chat, and I'm going to hold off on those until we've kind of gone through the first few sections. But please keep them in there. I am very much paying attention. Okay. All right. So let's talk about anatomy. There is a great video on Instagram right now where it's asking groups of people to identify a clitoris. So I'd love to know in the chat if you think you could identify the clitoris. And I'm going to draw a nice little picture for you guys today, and you can tell me what you think. So most of us look at the clitoris as kind of this little nub. Now my vulva is going to look like a walrus, so don't judge me. I'm not an artist, okay? All right, so here's a vulva, right? And so most of us think that the clitoris is just that little nub underneath the two outer and inner lips, right? So the vulva has outer lips, right? These outer lips here, sometimes they have hair on them. Then you have the inner lips, right? Or also called the labia minora, and these are the labia majora. And then on the inside, we have the actual vagina, right? So most people don't use the correct terminology, but what you're seeing here is a vulva. And this hole here, that hole, that's a vagina. And that's what things penetrate, right? Fingers, toys, penises, if that's your thing, right? That's a vagina. Vaginas do not have pleasure centers in them, right? If they did, we wouldn't be able to do things like have babies, because it would be entirely too excruciatingly painful. And it's painful enough just having the baby come out of our uterus and through that vaginal canal, right? But yeah, so that is the vagina. And the vagina stretches as we're aroused and relaxed. The vaginal fornix, it actually like constructs to accommodate lots more room than what's in there, right? So that's one thing to know about the vulva and the vagina, but I want to talk about the clitoris. So most people, like I said, they think the clitoris is just that little nubby there, right? But if I were to show you the entire anatomy of the clitoris, this is actually what it looks like. So yes, there's that little nub, but then there's a shaft, and there's wings, and there's vestibular bulbs, and the clitoris actually looks more like this on the inside of the body. Now show me in the chat if you knew this. Okay? That is what the clitoris looks like in real time, okay? And just like the penis, the clitoris, as it gets aroused, swells with blood. It swells to be almost 2 to 3 times bigger than it actually is when it's resting. The shaft here becomes erect, which is why you can see the head of the clitoris a little bit more on the outside than when we're not erect. And so the clitoris is a wonderful powerhouse of an organ, right? And so to just give those folks who are learning here a little just primer here, right? That is where the vagina is. So the vagina actually sits in between those two bulbs on the clitoris, right? So what does that mean? Oh man, Darius is saying it does look like a pair of balls with hands, and that always cracks me up. It does. It looks like a pair of balls with little hands and a little neck, right? And I love to tell penis owners, like, if I just rubbed your balls, would that make you orgasm? I mean, maybe, but it would take a lot of like just imagination for that to happen, right? The same is true for 70% of people with clitorises. If the penis or whatever's going inside of the vagina is just rubbing up against those vestibular bulbs or those balls that you see, 70% of us need a little extra, a little more than that to reach orgasm. So that means you've got to stimulate the external part of the clitoris, that little nubby on the outside, along with internal stimulation, okay? Because at the end of the day, most of our arousal comes from the clitoris, right? Whether it's external clitoral arousal or internal clitoral arousal. Oh man, Keys and Coffees calls it a bald eagle. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, a bald eagle. Good one. Okay. So, but yeah, that's how the clitoris works, right? And then there is a part on the clitoris that most people really don't know where it is, right? And that's called the G-spot. Tell me in the chat if you've ever heard about the G-spot and if you've ever found one. Most people, who aren't educated, and I may not be talking about the folks here because we know that you guys on the Field app are a little more adventurous, right, than just the vanilla folks. So, okay. So The clitoris is a wonderful powerhouse, but when we put two fingers into the vagina and curve them towards the navel, we feel this like spongy textured patch. Kind of feels like the roof of your mouth. That is actually the back side of the clitoris, right? So when we start to feel the back side of the clitoris and it starts to feel firm, we know that our partner is feeling aroused, right? We know that there's something happening there. And I want to just take a pause for the cause and say that like many people's idea of female arousal is like dripping wet, squirting all over the place. And I've got news for you guys, okay? Not everybody squirts. Not all people with vaginas and vulvas squirt. Also, not always is the lubrication of someone's vagina an indication of their arousal. There is a wonderful book by this researcher named Emily Nagoski. It's called Come As You Are. That's COME, Come As You Are. And in it, there's a lot of research on female sexual arousal, right? One of the first like points of Emily Nagoski's research was this idea of arousal non-concordance, right? So the idea that our bodies can get wet or hard, but we're not actually experiencing sexual arousal, right? And so um, for example, we people with penises wake up with morning wood. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are sexually aroused, even though your penis is erect, right? The same is true for people with clitorises and vulvas. Just because there may be some lubrication happening in the vagina or that's prevalent on the vulva, doesn't necessarily mean that we're aroused, right? And the opposite is true sometimes too. There may not be any lubrication at all, and we may be highly aroused. This is what we call arousal non-concordance. The idea that our bodies may not be showing signs of arousal, but our minds are, or vice versa. Our bodies are showing signs of arousal, but our minds are not there yet. So it's important to just check in. Like communication is going to be the biggest tool that you have in your toolbox when it comes to having great sex. But the only way to communicate is by checking in with yourself. So if I'm telling you things about the clitoris that you've never heard before and you have a clitoris, it's on you to find out, oh, well, how does my GSpot work? How does my clitoris work? What do I like for myself, right? And that means having a healthy relationship with masturbation, okay? Whether that's with your fingers or toys or, I don't know, the side of the couch, the dryer, the washing machine, like get creative, but know that when you have a real connection to your pleasure and through masturbation, then it's a lot easier for you to tell your partner or partners or potential partner what you like, how to do it, what gets you there. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to talk about that I want to say for people with clitorises is once you know your pleasure, stop faking it. Okay. I'm hoping there's nobody here who has faked an orgasm, but if you have, stop. Just don't do that anymore because it's doing a disservice to you, right, in the moment, and to anyone else that that person has sex with. Because when we fake it, we tell the people that we're with that that was good, right? And that really kind of messes things up for the next person because they're going to keep trying that thing that didn't work and they're going to think that it's working if we keep faking it. So stop faking your orgasms. If you are, it's not helping anybody. Okay. It's only hurting you and the people that you're with. So stop doing that. Okay. As part of your sensual self-care, you can make a commitment to honor your body and honor your yes and your no's. Okay. All right. Any questions? I do want to take a pause for the cause and answer any questions about the vulva or the vagina or the clitoris before I move on to my penis owning friends. Yes, there's lots of folks in the chat that are saying that Come As You Are is an incredible book. Folks have read it, so they love the book. Definitely go get it if you are interested in learning more about female sexual arousal. The GSpot does feel kind of spongy, Kit. It does. And the more aroused we get, the more firm it gets. But yes, it does feel kind of spongy and textured like a sponge, right? Yes. In fact, that little space that makes up the back end of the G-spot is called the urethral sponge. Not for nothing, but together the urethral sponge and the backside of our clitoris make up what's known as the G-spot. And the G-spot is just another way that we can please the clitoris, right? So just to recap what we've talked about for the clitoris owners here, the external part of the clitoris, that little nubby on the outside, those balls on the inside in between your vaginal canal, on either side of them there's balls, and on the back side there's the G-spot, right? These three areas are where we have the most sensitivity in our clitorises. So it's important for you to know how yours works, because mine works differently than yours, than your friends, than people on this call, right? So once you know how your clitoris works, do you like more external stimulation? Do you like more internal stimulation? Do you like them both at the same time? If you do, that's very good information to know about your pleasure and to share with a partner, right? So it looks like we have Maria, who's saying another good book is Women's Anatomy of Arousal by Sherry Winston. I have not heard of that one. I'm going to have to check that one out. And then In Her Element podcast says, yes, I need to look into that more. Thank you for this valuable info. You're welcome. Side note, a manicure should be required to enter the vagina. Yes. Say that again. Okay, not this kind of manicure, because no, this is my vagina finger. No, really. No, a manicure is definitely required. We don't want to scratch the inside of our partners, right? Especially if you are a vulva lover, if you are a pleaser of the pussy. That is the thing that you definitely want to make sure that you are. Actually, we're going to take a step back and we're going to say, making sure that you have clean hands and manicured hands, clean and manicured hands, right? So not only do we want to make sure that the nails are smooth and not going to scratch us on the inside, but we also want to make sure that there's no dirt, right? We're not bringing foreign substances into the vaginal environment, because that can throw us off, right? That can throw off our pH. It can, the higher our pH, so the vagina is a very acidic environment, right? If vulva owners out there know, like sometimes when you wear colored underwear, you might see, oh, there's a little stain. It looks like my discharge may have stained these underwear. Yeah, it has, because your vaginal fluid is closer on the pH scale to orange juice than it is to water. It's pretty acidic, but that acid helps keep out all of the things that are going to make that environment not flourish, right? So when we as vulva lovers and pleasers of vaginas start to bring in foreign substances that may have been on our hands from food or just being outside, then we start to disrupt that environment. And with disruption comes odor and infection, yeast infections, bacterial infections, and they're not fun, okay? So be a responsible pleaser of the vulva. Wash and manicure your hands. Thank you for that. Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Okay. So, JKOK says She Comes First by Ian Kerner. I highly, highly recommend that book, especially for the heterosexual folks on the call. If you are a person who is a pleaser of vaginas and you don't really understand what the title of that means, She Comes First is the best book to read. It also has really, really, really great tips for cunnilingus. I've recommended this to several of my couple clients, and the men in the relationship are always like, okay, I flagged a chapter on cunnilingus and it worked so well. So definitely check that out. Heather is asking, can you feel that in the butt too? Yes, you can. So the vagina and the anus both have very sensitive entryways, right? And the least little thing like friction or sharp nails can start to cause micro abrasions in those places. So definitely, yes, make sure when you are pleasing the butt and the vagina that you are using, and or the vagina, you are using your finger, you are using fingers that are smooth and clean. Now, when it comes to foreign substances in the anus, it's less, like the pH is less of a concern, but Yes, all of the manicure and washing for butts goes the same. Yes. Excellent. Okay. So now I want to kind of move into talking up to my penis owning friends. Hey, y'all. So today I want to talk just a little bit about the penis. Many of you may already know that the most sensitive part on the penis is the head, right? This is where the term giving head comes from, right? When a person with a penis knows that you want to please them sexually, what they want to feel is either your warm, wet mouth or your warm, wet body on their penises, starting at the tip, right? But underneath the tip, right? So the tip kind of comes up into, yes, I'm going to draw again. You love my drawings. Okay, so the tip comes up into a little head shape, right? A little upside down V. I'm going to draw a penis here for y'all. Okay, so the penis on the underside comes into this upside down V shape, right? That right there, starting here, is where the frenulum is. Now, the frenulum is often reported one of the most sensitive parts of the penis. And a few studies have shown that when you stimulate that part of the penis, when your partner is nearing orgasm, it can help them reach orgasm faster. Yeah. So by stimulate, I mean with your thumb or your tongue. We're just going to flick that part of the penis right underneath the head. I'll show you again. So if I were to do this with my penis, it would be like this, right? We're just massaging that frenulum area. For people who are circumcised, the frenulum is actually, who are not circumcised. So if you still have foreskin, the frenulum is connected to the foreskin. So don't try to peel the penis like it's a banana. It's not a banana. It's going to grow out of that foreskin. Let it, okay? Yes. So that's how the frenulum works. That flicker move, though, up and down or left and right on a partner's penis feels great anyway. If you are pleasing yourself, that is definitely a thing that you want to kind of try for yourself. Definitely recommend lots of lubricant. I know we didn't talk about this when we talked about vulvas and clitorises, but lubricant is important for both genitalia, because that's dry friction. You hear that? That sound? That is the enemy of pleasure. Okay. We want things to be nice and wet and lubricated so that friction doesn't start to cause those micro abrasions that we talked about earlier that can cause problems for both penis and vagina owners. Right. So, yes, we're going to make sure we're using lots of lubricant. Okay. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about for penises, and this is where it comes to like making sure that we are taking care of ourselves, right? Penis owners, many of you guys don't know that your morning wood is a symptom of a healthy working penis, right? So if you wake up in the morning and there isn't morning wood, often it's time to go see a medical professional. You may be approaching the early stages of erectile dysfunction. Super normal, lots of treatments available, but the earlier you can get in and get that treated, the better it's going to be for your sex life, right? So let's talk a little bit about the shaft of the penis, because the shaft of the penis gives us clues into penile health as well, right? So the shaft of the penis, when it gets erect, you notice these like veins. I'll show you on my drawing, right? These veins kind of protrude throughout the penis like that, right? Those veins are carrying blood to the tip of the penis. So the way that penises work, it's very similar to clitorises, right? When the penis is aroused, either because of mental stimulation or tactile stimulation, the penis will swell with blood. All of those veins that you're seeing are arteries that are coming from the heart and pumping blood into the penis. All of that blood that then kind of gushes into the penis makes it erect. And once it can't hold any more blood, boop, it reaches orgasm, right? That's how orgasm works. And so you'll notice things like cock rings are made, these little stretchy silicone rings. They sit at the base of the penis and they help restrict the flow of blood to the tip, which helps a partner stay harder, longer. But because we're restricting the flow of blood, the ability to orgasm is restricted, right? So they last a little bit longer. Now, if you start to notice that there are less veins, kind of protruding through the penis when you're aroused, if you're noticing that it is taking you a really long time to orgasm, if you're not orgasming at all, or if you are orgasming too quickly, these are all signs of erectile dysfunction. Okay. So again, super natural, super common, but there are also some really great remedies out there. There's hormone replacement therapy. There is, like I said, cock rings that are made specifically for folks that are experiencing erectile dysfunction. One that I recommend for my clients that I know about and have used personally with partners is called Giddy, Giddy. And they are a great like little natural remedy for erectile dysfunction. In fact, you can get them kind of customized to your size penis, which is why they work a little bit better than the ones you can just buy in the stores. So I love that that they do that. Erectile dysfunction could be like the cause of your erectile dysfunction can be so many things. Like it can be stress, insomnia, guilt and shame. It can also be like a symptom of an underlying, like, chronic disease or disorder. So if you're noticing that you may be experiencing some of the things that I talked about, go see your doctor, get a referral to a urologist who's a penis doctor who can help you kind of figure out what you want to do and how you want to do it. So want to make sure that we're talking about that. There's a question that says, does morning wood decrease with age? It does. It does. But I will say that one thing that I've learned from working with folks in the medical community, especially folks at men's sexual health clinics, is when you start to notice that, it's important that you continue to use your parts, right? Often morning wood decreases with age because we're using them less, right? And so if we're not having partnered sex, it's important to masturbate. And that's true for all people with all genitalia. It's important to masturbate. I had a medical doctor tell me once that our genitals are like, use them or lose them, right? And so when we aren't using them, oftentimes we start to experience dysfunction. So that, to answer your question, yes, it does decrease with age. Our testosterone levels decrease with age. So it's important for you to, just make sure everything's working well for yourself. And when you have a healthy relationship with masturbation, that becomes a thing that's prevalent, that you'll start to spot right away. All right. So the other thing I want to talk to you guys about when it comes to male sexual pleasure is the prostate. In the chat, I'd love for you guys to tell me, how many different types of orgasm are people with penises able to achieve? Just give me your best guess. Oh, okay. And while I wait for you guys to tell me how many orgasms people with penises can achieve, there's some really great comments in here. So Darius says, yeah, frankly, I noticed that when I'm partnered, the woodie's there every morning. Flying solo is less regular. That's 100% true. That makes a lot of sense. And it's because that's how your body is wired, right? So when you're partnered, great. But when you're not partnered, it's important that you are continuing to have that kind of relationship with yourself. Mm-hmm. So the question, I think I may have asked the question a little ambiguously. So Dennis says that he's had at least 5 different orgasms. And the question is like one after another or in a short time? And that's a great question. And I meant different types. Like, we can stimulate certain parts of the body to help them achieve orgasm. What are those, right? And so I'm just going to give you the answer. And the answer is 2, right? So there are 2 main types of orgasms that people with penises can achieve. And those are the penile orgasm that most everybody is familiar with. When you touch a penis, tactile touch, it reaches orgasm, right? But then there is the prostate orgasm, right? So the prostate is a little like walnut-sized organ inside of the male body that sits right above the base of the penis, in between the rectum and the navel, right? The prostate is responsible for urinary, reproductive, and sexual functioning for people with penises. When a man goes to get a prostate exam, the doctor takes a lubricated finger, puts it into the anus, curves it towards the navel, and feels for this walnut-sized object. That is the prostate. Some heterosexual folks, when they get prostate exams, have to ask themselves life-altering questions like, man, my doctor put his finger in my butt and I got hard. What does this mean? Does it say something about my sexuality? And at the end of the day, all people with penises are hardwired to feel pleasure through the prostate, right? So let me tell you a little bit about prostate orgasms. So 3 things that stand out to me that I think are the most important to know. And the first is the prostate orgasm is reportedly 33% more intense than the regular penile orgasm, right? The second thing is that it activates muscles towards the base of the penis. So I find that semen shoots out a little higher with prostate orgasms. And then the third thing that you should know is that refractory period. So y'all know the period of time once your penis is orgasmed, bloop, there's that little period of time or long period of time, depending on your age and your health, where your penis doesn't respond to any kind of sexual stimuli. It won't get up. It's just, it's resting, right? That's called a refractory period. And the refractory period for prostate orgasms is little to none, right? So that means you can orgasm and get it back up, and orgasm and get it back up, and orgasm and get it back up. Now, let me just be clear that once you orgasm and that orgasm is accompanied by ejaculation, you will not ejaculate again, but your body will orgasm. Okay? Does that make sense? You guys said stimulate the prostate. Yes, stimulate the prostate. Stimulate the prostate. Okay. And then Darius says, okay, butt stuff it is from now on. 33%. Yeah. Yes, definitely. Definitely. Like it's a pleasure center that many people with penises haven't really set out to explore. So definitely stimulate the prostate. And there's a few ways that you can stimulate the prostate. The first way is obviously through the anus, right? I've talked about this. You can use a prostate toy or finger or whatever object of your choice that is body safe. Making sure that you're using lots of lubricant. Okay. But yeah, so prostate massagers, there's vibrators for the prostate, there's dilators for the prostate or for the anus so that you can kind of get in there. If you've never done any butt stuff, I highly recommend starting honestly on your own, right? I'm always going to say start by yourself. And try, doing some massage, seeing how that feels, making sure you're using a good lubricant. I like to use a mixture of silicone and water-based together because it seems to last longer. Yes, there are hybrid lubes and hybrid lubes are fine, but I like to use 2 different kinds together. That's what I'm talking about. A hybrid lube is when they come in the same bottle, but I'm not talking about hybrid lubes. I'm talking about silicone and water-based together, right? Definitely want to try like doing some massages. Starting with an anal plug or a butt plug, one that's like the size of your finger, right? And then you can kind of graduate to things that are a little bit bigger. For butt stuff, there's a company that I love called B-Vibe, and these people are not paying me, by the way, to tell you about these. These are things that I personally love and use myself. So B-Vibe makes B-Vibe. They make some really, really great anal products, like for butt plugs and things like that. And there's also one on the market, and the name is escaping me right now, but it's like expandable, right? So it starts like this, and then you can twist the bottom of it, and it expands and grows with you. So those are some really good options if you're looking to try some butt stuff. But there is a second way Yes. Oh, Ofer says it helps preventing playing with the prostate, stimulating the prostate helps prevent prostate cancer. 100% correct. Those orgasms and just stimulating the prostate does help keep a healthier prostate. So yeah, y'all better know your stuff. Um, yes, you definitely want to start with the smallest, your smallest finger. I know I said this one, but definitely start with your smallest finger and then kind of work your way up to in size as you're comfortable. Notice that when it comes to butt stuff, right? You are not gonna feel like it shouldn't feel painful. You may feel pressure, and that might be a little there might be a little discomfort as you just learn to relax and kind of ease into that feeling, but it should not be painful. Butt stuff should never be painful. If it is, stop. You're not using enough lube, you're not relaxed, just stop, right? I highly recommend for people wanting to try butt stuff to try vibrators because vibrators naturally help to relax the muscles around them. So definitely try a vibrating anal plug if you're having some difficulty. JKOK says salad tossing. Yep. Well, salad tossing is not going to get you. Oh, you were saying other ways to stimulate the prostate. No, unless your tongue is a couple inches long, it's not, your tongue is not going to stimulate the prostate. But there is another way to stimulate the prostate. So there is so just behind the balls, there is this little fleshy freeway here, right? Fuzzy freeway called the perineum, also known as the gooch or the happy bridge. I don't know what you call it. Tell me what you call that little space between the balls and the butthole. The taint. I've heard it called the taint as well. But the part behind so between the balls and the butthole, it's called the perineum or the perineum. It depends on what part of the world you're in and how you say it. But that little fleshy part, that fleshy freeway between the balls and the butthole sits right beneath the base of the penis, right? So the base of the penis is not on the outside. It's actually on the inside. The next time you have some free time to yourself and you've got a boner, check behind your balls. There's a little lump there. That's the base of your penis, right? So the penis actually ends on the inside of the body, just behind the balls. If we were to put upward pressure on that part of the penis, the base of the penis behind the balls, or just behind that, we're able to indirectly put pressure on the prostate. Okay. And that can help you achieve a prostate orgasm. Okay. The hard and soft back and forth. Scrotum is another thing. Yes. Okay. So the scrotum is the balls, right? So this is the scrotum, right? The ball sack, that's the scrotum. Just behind the ball sack is this perineum that I'm talking about. Between right at the end of the ball sack to right before you get to the anus, that is called the perineum. That's the part we're talking about. Putting upward pressure on that part or massage on that part is going to help to stimulate your prostate. Now, it's going to be an indirect stimulation. So you want to make sure that your penis is aroused in the way that you are normally used to being aroused before you start to try to stimulate the prostate in that way, because the prostate kind of needs your penis to be aroused for this to work. Okay. So the question is that the sac? Yes, the sac and the scrotum are the same thing. Yep, that's the ball sack. And just behind the ball sack is a little fleshy piece of skin. It's like a fuzzy freeway, I like to call it. And that is the perineum. Yes, Kegels help too. Kegels will help with accessing the prostate. Actually, one thing that I'm really curious for folks to start researching is if you're doing Kegels while you're having sex, is that stimulating the prostate? Because what I've learned from my clients in the 8 years that I've been doing clinical sexology is that when they are doing Kegels, when they're having sex and they're stimulating the prostate with that exercise, those people have much more intense orgasms. So that's a thing to remember. Thank you guys for weighing in here. Yeah. Thank you. Marcus says you can have 2 or 3. Yes, yes. Okay, so that's how the human body works. Yes, yoga does also help. Again, going back to the self-care of this, right? So when we think about ways that we can start to incorporate sensual self-care into our self-care routine, things like Kegels, masturbation, kind of butt play with yourself. These are all things that you can start to explore to see, how does that nourish myself? How does my sex feel after that, right? You could think I'm full of shit right now, but try it and see what happens. And if nothing does, then I'm full of it. But if something does, let me know. And tell a friend. It's important that we share this knowledge, right? Yes, I'm a sex educator, but I'm not the only one who can educate people about sex. So since you're sitting in on this class, it's now your duty to become a sexpert and tell the people that you're with and the people that you talk to about the things that you know, right? Will I hold something on aftercare? Yes, we can talk about aftercare, although this class is specifically for sensual self-care. Aftercare is typically a thing that we do with a partner. I am happy to address that towards the end of class or in the chat. But yes, we totally want to talk about aftercare because it is very important for kind of resolving the experience that we've had. So we'll definitely talk about aftercare. And if we need a whole workshop on that, we can talk to the folks at Field about that too. Okay, so we talked about the anatomy, right? Now I want to talk about the biggest sexual organ in the body, which we failed to talk about so far, and that is between your ears and not your legs, okay? It's your brain. The brain is the biggest sexual organ in the human body. And without it, we wouldn't be able to orgasm, right? So that means when you are focused on, when your brain is focused on what happened at work or this big project that you're doing or the fight you had with your partner or a family drama issue or finances, all of these thoughts, all of these pleasure intrusive thoughts are taking your brain away from your body, right? So one thing that I love to talk about, especially when we start to talk about sensual self-care, is the sensuality of it, right? So our brains, being the biggest sexual organs in the body, need to be kind of grounded in our bodies for us to experience the totality of pleasure, right? So yes, guilt and shame are like the two biggest barriers to pleasure. It's actually guilt, shame, and stress are the two biggest barriers to pleasure for our brains, right? So the more we can kind of work to eliminate that guilt and that shame and that stress, or at least reduce it, right? The more we're going to be able to focus on prioritizing our pleasure. Okay, but first, I want to get a little nerdy and talk a little bit about how our brain perceives sexual stimuli so that you can really start to understand how your brakes and your accelerators work, right? So, Emily Nagoski, like I said, wrote a book, and in it, she really does break down the dual control system of our brains. Dual control, meaning two things control the way that our brains experience sexual stimuli. The first thing is our sexual excitation system. Our sexual excitation system, or SES, is like all the things that make us turned on. These are our gas pedals, right? It's our accelerators. What are the things that when you're exposed to them, when you see them, you're like, ooh, I'm on, I am turned on. Those are your accelerators, right? For many people, it can be seeing their partner in their element, or watching things on television, or hearing sexy stories or audiobooks, right? All of those are kind of ways that we are turning on the brake or the gas pedals, right? But then we have the other system that's controlling us, which is our brakes, right? Our sexual inhibition system. And so these are all the reasons why you don't want to get aroused, right? And when our body starts to experience those breaks, we start to get easily distracted from sex. Pleasure is kind of really hard or elusive for us to find. We may not orgasm during sex or even experience arousal. And that's because our brakes are being pressed, right? So if we think about, and I hate this analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway. If we think about our sex as like a drive, people always talk about sex drive, right? It's a car. The things that get your drive moving are your gas pedals, your accelerators. The things that stop you on the dime and keep you from going any further, those are your brakes, right? So it's important for a person to know we all have different sensitivity on our gas and our brakes, right? If you've ever driven a car and like you got to press the brake down a little bit before it actually stops the car, some of us have brakes that are just not there. They're high, like they it's hard for them to be pressed, but some of us have brakes that are very easy to be pressed. And when we're experiencing things like overwhelm, exhaustion, depression, our brakes are going to be a lot more sensitive, right? You just kind of breathe on the brake and the car stops. Okay. And the same is true for our excitation system, right? When we're feeling exhaustion and overwhelm, anxiety, all of those things are going to contribute to our inability for our gas is going to get stuck. We're not going to be able to press it because there's so many breaks happening, right? So the goal, especially when you're talking about sensual self-care and prioritizing your self-pleasure, is to try to recognize and identify what those brakes and accelerators are, firstly. Then what we want to do is remove those brakes and bring in more accelerators, right? So I am going to put, I'm sure a few of you are like, how do I know if my brake or my accelerator is sensitive or not, right? There are some really great quizzes from Emily Nagoski's book that have been put online, and I found them for you. So the first, I'm going to try to put in the chat the excitation quiz. There are 2 quizzes you can take. The excitation quiz and the inhibition quiz, right? So the excitation quiz is going to tell you what your SES score is, right? So your sexual excitation system. It's going to tell you whether you have high sexual excitation, medium sexual excitation, or low sexual excitation, right? Having high sexual excitation means that you are easy to arouse. It's super like you have your gas gets pressed with the touch of a button, right? Having medium excitation is very normal. Often, like this is where most people fall, right? This is very common. And then having low excitation is usually correlated with either one of 2 things, right? If you have a hard time getting aroused, there could be some asexuality happening there, right? Meaning your sex just is not your thing. And that's perfectly fine, right? Folks on the asexual spectrum don't desire sexual experiences, and that's okay. That's perfectly normal as well. But the other concern there, right, when you have low excitation, could also be sexual dysfunction, right? So making sure that you're checking in with your medical professionals. If you don't feel like asexuality is on the table, then maybe it's time to see a mental health professional to kind of unpack what might be impacting this low excitation for yourself, right? Now, the inhibition quiz is going to tell you how sensitive your brakes are, right? So if you feel like if you've got a high inhibition score, that means your brakes are pressed at the drop of a dime. It doesn't take much. You are easily distracted from sex. You really need to focus on feeling pleasure. And for those folks, I highly recommend bringing in masturbation, right? Making sure you have a good self-pleasure routine, but also bringing those things that you find when you are self-pleasuring, like if you're using a vibrator or a cock ring or any kind of assistive devices. Definitely using those with your partner or with partnered sex is going to help kind of eliminate some of those breaks for you. If you have medium inhibition, again, that's where most people fall. About 50% of the people who've taken this are just medium, right? And then there is the people who have low inhibition. Now, I'm speaking for myself here because I have high excitation and low inhibition, which means people like us often use sex as a de-stressor. So sometimes we have to reel it in, right? We have to kind of take it a step back, right? Sometimes if we're in a partnered situation, sometimes our partner may not want it when we do. And so having a healthy masturbation routine and self-pleasure routine is going to be helpful for those folks too, because we tend to have sex compulsively, right? So recognizing what your brakes and your accelerators are and how that works, super important just for you to be able to relate and explain that to other folks, right? So me with high excitation and low inhibition means it's going to be really difficult for me to be with a person who has low excitation and high inhibition unless we have this conversation first, right? Unless I know that about them. That means I'm going to have to temper my expectations because there may be a desire discrepancy here, right? And I could talk all day about desire discrepancy, but we're focusing on ourselves right now. So if that's you, definitely like recognize what your breaks are. Try to eliminate those breaks for yourself. Try to bring in more gas pedals, more accelerators, so that you can start to enjoy your sexual pleasure for yourself. Yes. So, okay, there is a good question on Kegel exercises, which I will get to in a second. But are these concrete concepts? Can we relearn to uninhibit ourselves? 100%. That is a great question, Ben. Yes, you can learn to uninhibit yourself. And in fact, what you'll find is if you take these quizzes, in very stressful times of your life, you might have higher inhibitions than in not stressful times of your life, right? So these are not concrete. This is not how you were born. It's not like, oh, I just have sensitive breaks and it's going to be like this forever. That's not the case, right? That could be true now. And as you start to take away some of those breaks and bring in more gas, you might find, oh, it's easier for me to, especially when I have this certain gas pedal, like this certain thing really does it for me, right? That's the kind of exploration that I want you to explore, right? That's what I want you to do for yourself, for your sensual self-care. It's like, what are my breaks, but also what are my accelerators, and how weighted are these, right? How can I get rid of some things you can't get rid of, right? Like one of my breaks is my relationship with my partner, right? If I don't feel like we're in a good space, I can't do it. I'm not going to get aroused. That's a big break for me, right? And so if we've been fighting all day, I can't eliminate that unless I get to the heart of the matter, which is like, okay, I'm sorry. You're right. Like, what is the thing that needs to happen, right? So yes, these are not concrete concepts, meaning you have the ability to be who you want to be in that space. But it's important for you to just kind of understand what might be in your subconscious, right? We might not even know that like our boss is a big asshole, and him being such an asshole and like weighing on my brain before I get home is keeping me from having good sex, right? So maybe before I get home, I need to like do a yoga class, or I need to go scream at a wall and say fuck you to him a million times, right? Like there's there are creative ways that we can start to eliminate our breaks and bring in more accelerators that can help change that situation. Okay. Those muscles you feel are what you want to exercise, so you tense and release them. Yes. So Kegel, the best way to do Kegel exercises, depends on like what kind of genitals you have. If you join me on the chat, I will send you some links from some friends of mine that have kind of outlined male and female Kegels, but it's kind of like picking a napkin off the floor with your butthole. That's the best thing I can like. If you think about like a napkin, right? You kind of want to pick it off the floor like this, like that. That's kind of what you want to do. You want to kind of lift the muscles in your genital and anal regions in that way, right? And the way that so that is a Kegel, right? But the best way to do that is kind of progressively, right? So you want to start with just a bloop, like a one, right? And then maybe hold for 2 seconds and release. And then maybe hold for 3 seconds and release. And then maybe hold for 4 seconds and release, right? These are really good warm-up exercises. If you're like, oh no, I'm a pro at this, I want to do more, there are weighted Kegel balls that you can use either in the anus or in the vagina that will help with that, right? That will help you kind of gain more control over those muscles. If you're finding that you're having a hard time doing Kegels or understanding what Kegels are, go see a pelvic floor specialist, okay? Whether that's a pelvic floor physical therapist or a pelvic floor specialist is going to help you really understand how that's working. Our pelvic floor is directly responsible for all of the ways that we're able to use these muscles, right? So if you're noticing that there might be some issues or you're just concerned, go see a pelvic floor specialist. Yes. And Dennis makes a good point. Do not confuse these with butt cheek clenches. I'm not saying squeeze your butt together. That's not it, right? We're not squeezing the muscles of our actual butt cheeks together. We're squeezing those muscles that we use like when we have to go to the potty, right? And so if you were to stop those, if you were to kind of keep yourself from going to the bathroom on yourself, then those are that's the muscle you kind of want to expand and contract. Can you see that I'm doing them? Okay. So last thing I want to leave you with is some things that you can start to incorporate into your sensual self-care routine, right? So I said the best way, I like to think of the body and the brain as, so the body is like the elephant and the brain is the elephant rider. You know, the little man sitting on top of the elephant? The body, the elephant, likes to be, the way that you talk to the elephant is not with words, but it's with sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell, right? So if we want our bodies to get relaxed and get into a space of pleasure, what we want to do is dim the lights, right? Put on some sexy music for our ears. Maybe watch something that's going to make us feel aroused, right? Maybe bring in some aphrodisiacs or things that make you feel good when you eat them, like chocolate or sugar. Now, if you have a partner with a vulva or you are a person with a vulva, do not put the sugar on your vulva. It's going to disrupt your pH, and we talked about why that's a bad thing, right? But eat it. Right? Right. Listen to some music, some Barry White, right? But thinking about all the ways that you can incorporate sight and sound and taste and touch and smell into your pleasure experiences with yourself, right, is going to help you with your self-care routine, right? So I like to think about, okay, for example, and this is one way that you can also just bring pleasure into your space. So let's say you go to the gym every day, right? You're listening to your music, you're doing your whatever you do at the gym. I'm not a gym person, so I don't know what people do at the gym. But you're doing the thing at the gym, and maybe once you put your weights down or you've done your yoga, you sit there for 5 more minutes and you just do a few kegels, right? Uh, or another way that you can practice sensual self-care is having, like, I love to do self-seduction. So that means like, okay, you know, you're about to have a play session with yourself, right? You're taking my advice. You're like, Reba says you should have a good relationship with masturbation. So let's make a ritual out of it, right? So first things first, we're going to sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. Sight, we're going to look, we're going to figure out, okay, what is it that we can bring in? For me, I like for my room to be clean. Okay. I cannot get into the mood with a dirty room. So I'm going to clean up my room first, right? Not sexy, but it's going to help me for sexy time. Right. Number two is sound, right? So I'm going to put on some music. Let's say some Barry White. I like Barry White, or some jazz, right? Sight, sound, taste. Okay. For taste, I like to just bring in something like a nice little snack, like some nuts or some trail mix, just because, you know, that's going to get my taste buds all excited. Or you can do something like, when I want to like up the ante, I'll do like a nice, rich, decadent dessert from my favorite little bakery around the corner, just to have that as part of this like ritualistic experience, right? Smell, I like to light candles that smell really good. Touch, I like to have sheets that are kind of like a satin cotton blend, so they feel really good and cool on my skin, right? So maybe it's a blanket that you lay down, like it's soft fur, or I don't know what feels good to you, right? So that's sight, sound, taste, smell, and now I'm going to touch myself, right? But before I touch myself, I want my skin to feel good, right? Like when I'm touching myself, I want to feel like nice and soft. So I'm going to make sure I've got all of that, you know. Now I'm ready. I'm getting ready for myself as if I were a lover, right? You are your longest relationship. You are the first person and the last person that you're going to have sex with, right? And so getting ready for yourself in that way, ritualizing your masturbation, is going to help you connect not only to your sexual self, but to your actual self, right? That's the thing you need. Yes, bring in coffee and weed and ice cream. Hell yeah, whatever makes you feel good, bring that in. Again, we're getting rid of all of those breaks and we're bringing in accelerators. And if you don't know what your accelerators are, sensual self-care is how you figure it out, right? What does it look like for me to seduce myself? And it's going to make you a great partner too. Okay. How about some weed with self pleasure? Heck yeah, I wholly agree with that. That can help be a accelerator for a lot of folks. I am a weed advocate. But we are out of time, y'all. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the chat. Join me on the Field app in the group chat. I'm in there with y'all. I do exercise. I'll tell you about that when we get in the chat. But thank you guys for showing up, and I hope to see you again soon.